Welcome to Superlatives, the show where comics go head-to-head. Every week we pick a topic in which our comics are going to compete. This week we have Best Comic Book Death. Each episode we're going to have two editors come in with their comics that they have nominated. They step into the ring and battle it out. When the arguments are done, our moderator, myself, decides the verdict and decides which comic is walking away with the prize that week. My name is Ellen Boener. I'm an associate editor here at IDW working on the TMNT, Twilight Zone. I'm also our games manager in our new games department. And I'm here with Nick Nino and Jake Thomas. I'll throw it to them to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Nick. I edit The Rocketeer, Event Horizon, and Twilight Zone with Ellen at IDW.
And I'm Jake. I edit the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles line. I'm also the senior group editor that oversees a number of other lines as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for being here today. We've got a very exciting topic that I know we outside of the room already started talking about how difficult it was to pick comics for this specific episode, not because there aren't a lot of options, but because there are truly an unlimited amount of options for comic book deaths. It seems like almost every character has had their shot at taking the final bow. And now we're just getting to pick of the litter, getting to talk about what we want to do.
Some of them multiple times.
Yes. So I would just want to start us off. What do we think makes a good death in general, and then also specifically in comics?
I mean, I think meaning is the big thing. You want this death to have meaning. You want it to affect all of the characters surrounding this death. And I think you also want the reverberations to kind of be felt for a while. You know, you don't want just this death to happen and have it be a big moment. And then the next issue, everyone's kind of fine. You know? Right. Obviously, there are deaths that are also the end of comics and things like that as well. So going out in a big way can be part of it. But regardless, I think meaning and lasting effect would be the two things for me that you really want to see out of a good death, both in real life and in comics, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going for a great comic book death personally. I'm hoping a big pose happens. Nick, what about you? What do you got?
I think Jake said it all. I think, obviously there's also, in addition to that, there's also the way the reader reacts to it. I think one thing I love about mine, my choice for today is that it really, even just skimming it before this episode, really started to make me choke up a little. Like you really feel a good death in fiction. And I think that there are a lot of deaths in comics, but very few make us feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with so many people in comics, as we said, do get to come back. Mm-hmm. So in a medium where it is so, I don't want to say common, but it is standard practice that death is not necessarily the end. How do you make it meaningful when the reader in the back of their mind might be thinking, well, what if they come back? Or they probably will come back.
It lives in the reaction of the characters. You know, there's one of the things that makes Spielberg a great director is the reaction shot. He knows that it's not just what's happening, but it's how what's happening makes people feel. So what is going to make these deaths work, even if they think maybe this person might come back, maybe, but it's not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed in life. And so I think that effect on the characters is really what helps sell the moments, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts?
No, I totally agree. I remember to cite another death in comics, when Damian Wayne died, they had that, everyone reacted across the bat line to it. But there was the Batman and Robin issue that followed was a silent issue where Bruce just goes about his business and can't. Mm-hmm. He just tries to, and he, it ends with him, breaking down and sobbing, and it was just really emotionally impactful. And even though we kind of knew Damian wouldn't stay dead for long, that issue was a ton of fun just to live in that status quo and to feel that with these characters.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. There's so many examples of criticisms of character death that the main reaction is, why did people move on so quickly, mm-hmm. right? Like if anyone in your life dies, even tangentially related to you, it has such a huge impact on you personally. So it is, and I know there's so many reasons that sometimes happens in comics, especially the farther back we go in comics history, where it was just not being written in a format where we wanted the stories to move. We wanted things to continue changing, and it was very Adventure of the Week focused. And as that's evolved, we've gotten more and more opportunities to play out really fascinating story arcs relating to death. One, I was talking to Nick a little while ago when we were talking about this concept, the idea of like God Country as kind of an example where this whole comic is about like a character walking towards death and how that becomes like the crux, the emotional crux of the entire series or the entire miniseries. And I like, you couldn't have had a comic like that back at the beginning. Like there's no way, even just obviously for so many reasons. But I think it's really interesting to see how death in and of itself has changed in comics. And we have two really great examples because we're looking at comics across a wide spread of time for this issue, which I think is a good transition. Do you guys want to introduce the comics you guys have chosen for today's best death in comics ever?
Sure. I'll start with issue number 121 of the Amazing Spider-Man, which is the death of Gwen Stacy.
One that immediately all of us were thinking of as soon as the topic came up.
I felt bad suggesting it because Nick is always calling me a basic B around the office. It's unrelenting.
He's really brutal.
He is, and I played right into his hand here, but I couldn't help it. To me, there was just no other choice. You had to talk about Gwen.
I think that's one thing we're all facing with this podcast too, is like there's stuff we just have to talk about. If we're saying the best one ever done, of course we're going to hit some classics. So I'm really excited to talk about that one. And then Nick, what have you brought in for us today? Who is your sacrifice?
My sacrifice, I wasn't really content to go the side character, so I chose Spider-Man himself. I went with the death of Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate Spider-Man number 160.
Yes. So I think we're talking about a span of, I believe it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but 1973 to 2011, I think is when it came, in 2011 or 2012, which obviously several ages of comics have passed between these two, which is really interesting to talk about. So I just want to talk a little bit broadly about Spider-Man in general and his relationship to death. Another thing we talked about also, can we shout out for those viewing at home, Jake Thomas has a perfect shirt for today.
I did. I wore my shirt that is skeletons and spider webs.
Yeah, we were talking a lot about Spider-Man, almost more than any character, is so entangled with death. And the fact that we have two different Spider-Man comics as heavy hitter contenders for the best death in comics, I think is really telling about the series. And also just going back through the canon of Spider-Man, there's multiple other deaths we could have picked as a top death for him.
Absolutely. I mean, it all starts with Uncle Ben.
Right.
Which was also a contender. But I think Spider-Man was one of the first real characters where they were going out of the way to ground this superhero. He was a very normal person. And that's something that normal people face all the time. And Spider-Man in particular, he has, the classic Parker luck. Like, he's not lucky. He runs into misfortune all the time. We talk about Uncle Ben, but even before Uncle Ben, like, his parents are dead before we even meet him. Like, he starts having lost two parents. Now he's lost an uncle. Not too far before this issue, Gwen Stacy's father dies, Captain Stacy. So, he is a character that's sort of built around a lot of these very real and very relatable tragedies. And I think that that's one of the things that made him feel more real. And talking about comics ages, there's some people who talk about this issue as being the sort of fulcrum point between the Silver Age and the Bronze Age, which is where comics went to being a little more grounded, a little more socially responsible. The classic Marvel line was, "It's the world outside your window." And it starts feeling a lot more that way here than it did with the Fantastic Four and classic Captain America and stuff like that. So, I think, Spider-Man has to feel grounded, and few things ground us more than loss and death.
They really jam-packed this issue, too, because there's also the subplot of Harry recovering from a bad acid trip, or still in a bad acid trip.
Yep.
And they get really preachy about that as well.
Well, that changed the comics code, because previously the comics code had said you couldn't do drugs in comics. But I believe it was the government actually asked them to do. They knew that Marvel was very big with kids and counterculture. So the government said, hey, can you do an issue about drugs? And they were, well, there's the comics code, but they actually got, the comic code changed because of that storyline as well.
And that was the previous one when it first is revealed that Harry is on LSD. Yeah. It's really wild to look at how they're talking. I mean, speaking of a different era, to put myself in the mood for both of these comics, I was listening to the top 100 hits of the year they came out. So I was listening to Marvin Gaye, Cher, all Elton John. So it's like really wild to put yourself in that mindset where like LSD is the big drug on the market, and there's like a lot of just wild social cultural issues at play that like so far from now.
But I mean, it's also very telling, and I think I don't know how those conversations went with the feds and those guys, but I think it's nice that the person that they have having that experience is Harry. They don't introduce some rando character who is like, oh, here's Daryl, our friend you've never met before, but he's always a problem, and now he's doing that. Like it was somebody that you liked, that you knew, that was like a normal person, and this person had this problem that a lot of other people have.
It's also really interesting that he is specifically a character of quite a bit of privilege.
Yes.
He's a man, he's rich, he's like the only born son of like a billionaire.
Yeah.
Like he is incredibly privileged. And I think the Doctor even has a line where he says, maybe if he hadn't been in such a fit of depression, it would have been different, which is like, I was surprised that line was in there. I'm actually surprised they weren't told to take it out for the sake of, it's always bad, from the comics code.
Yeah.
But since we're getting into this, talk us through what's going on in Spidey's life. We've already touched a little bit on Harry. What is going on with Spidey in the lead up to this, and why this issue? Why this one, not Gwen Stacy's dad, not Ben? Why this issue?
Well, what's going on in this is they had kind of recently broken up, Gwen and Peter, and they were just kind of starting to get back together when this issue happens. And for me, the big thing here is it's not just that Gwen dies, but it's that Peter plays a very distinct part in her death. And we'll get into this a lot, but I submitted this issue. I think it's a very powerful issue. I also sometimes think that it broke superhero comics a little bit in a way that's interesting. But the fact that he's responsible, that there is the famous snap, she was probably going to die anyway, but Peter's actions did it. And they're pretty clear about that, especially later on. Again, that grounds the superhero, and that changes things from these characters who are, peons of perfect, social attitudes and all this stuff, to people who can make deadly mistakes. Yeah. And I think for the story, it's fantastic. It's incredible drama. It's heartbreaking. It is a real gut punch of a story. But I also, I worked at Marvel for 11 years, and it was something that I would have trouble with frequently, was that like superheroes are kind of childish. And I don't say that in a bad way. They're wonderful that way. And I think that trying to mature them sometimes breaks them, And I think like the thing I used to talk about to just goose people and make them angry at me, and I did it to Dave Wilgosh earlier, is say like if Spider-Man was in the real world, we would all be J. Jonah Jameson. Like everyone would be like, who is this lunatic who keeps going around webbing people up? Because those criminals would all also inevitably get off. They've been extrajudiciously, it was like he would be a menace, and he's also in a mask all the time. Right now, we've got a bunch of people, not to get terribly political on here, upset that there are these masked people who we can't hold accountable doing all of these things. He's a masked guy. We don't know who he is. He's taken all of this stuff into his own hands. Like Jonah's position is the sensible position, but we don't think that reading the book, because we see into Peter's head and we know that he is a good man who is only trying to do well and is constantly selflessly putting himself in danger and all this kind of stuff. But in the real world, we wouldn't do that. And also in the real world, people make mistakes. And that is something where, like, I edited Punisher for a long time, and I had rules about the Punisher. And one of the rules was that, like, he can't really make mistakes. And Tom Brevoort, who's like the guru over there at Marvel, I talked to him about Punisher a bunch. And one of the things he would say is every time someone gets given Punisher to write, one of the stories they want to tell is, what if Punisher accidentally kills an innocent person? And Tom's response was always, that's the shortest Punisher story in the world, because the minute he kills an innocent person, he puts the gun in his mouth and he ends it. Like, he will not allow himself to hurt an innocent person. And we can control that as the editors and the writers. We can say, like, well, yeah, Punisher can do all this stuff and blow up all these buildings and shoot all these guns crazy, and he never hits an innocent person because I said so. And that's what makes him okay, you know? And Peter's, you know, I think all superheroes kind of work that way. So for Peter to be responsible for this death, even in this kind of roundabout way, again, thinking about him as if he was a police officer and he accidentally killed someone, you would kind of be like, I don't know if you should be out on the street with a gun anymore, you know? But because he's Peter and we know him and we love him, we go, Peter, put the costume back, like, get back out there and do it. Don't give up, Peter, you know? And so there's stuff about this issue that, again, like, I love it, but I look at it and I'm like, man, it's kind of tough. Yeah. It's a really tough issue, but I think it's also a testament to how good it is, that I think a lot of people don't think about that stuff. And a lot of it, like, it's such a strong story that it potentially does all of these kind of crazy things, but people just go, yeah, but it's great. It's Jerry Conway and Gil Kane just coming in hot, wanting to tell the best story they can. Jerry Conway was 21 years old when he wrote this, I think, maybe 20. You know, and he was about Peter's age, coming in here with something to prove, and you really feel it, you know? And I think also, you know, there's the whole fridging women conversation. And I think that that's where this is a little different, because it's also Peter's fault. Like, I think a lot of times when we have the, like, fridging conversation, there's this idea of, like, oh, it gives the, you know, someone else does this to a person so that the hero has something to work against. Here it is again, the fact that Peter's culpable to some degree, I think also challenges that notion a little bit.
I mean, I think it's very fair to say that, and perhaps there'll be something to say about this, but, like, Peter, as somebody who is naive and untrained, taking life and death into his hand, somebody died. So yes, it is his responsibility because he didn't know any better.
Yeah.
He didn't know what was going to happen. If he's taking on this much, shouldn't he know that this is a possibility? Shouldn't he have known that catching her that way is dangerous? And obviously, it's like the biggest consequence in the world for him. But I think that's a really interesting thing, talking about, like, the naivete, the childishness of a superhero, because it takes a certain kind of person to put on a mask and go fight crime and think they can save the world.
Yeah, yeah. I can do this all better than anyone else, and I can do it unfettered from anyone else too. Like, he doesn't join the police. He doesn't work for any official agency. Like, he's like, no, I know better. I have to operate on my own. And again, as a fantasy, great story, you know? But the more you try to make that real, the more you're also kind of like, yeah, I don't know if that's a great idea. Like,
I think they might have a point. Oh, no.
Yeah, I might be J. Jonah Jameson.
Live long enough to become J. Jonah Jameson. Right. You all die a hero.
Yeah. We're all born a Peter Parker, but we live long enough to see ourselves become
There is a line in here when he returns. Oh, it's in the issue after, 122.
Another great issue.
Yes, which I read. I went and read both, which, interesting parallel. We get a Green Goblin death with both of these as well, which I can't wait to talk about some of the parallels here. But they actually get a really funny snide remark at editors. I can't remember exactly what he says, but he goes in to get information on where Norman might be hiding. after Gwen Stacy's death, and he goes into the office and like, you don't know the bad end of an editor or something. It's like, well, where he's just making fun of editors for no reason. And I'm like, Roy, stand up for yourself. Roy, the editor at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure Roy Thomas put that line in there.
I'm sure.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, wow. There's so much to talk about on this one. I want to kind of turn to Nick now to give us an intro on what's going on. Obviously, very different. So this is 121 of what will go on to be a very long-running series. This is the end of an ongoing series. So there's more to tell us. But tell us what's going on in Ultimate Spider-Man. What's up with this issue? Why this death? Obviously, there's a lot of deaths throughout the Ultimate line. And this... we're far into comics history in 2011. For those wondering, on the music playlist for me on this one, it was Adele's Rolling in the Deep and LMFAO's Party Rock Anthem. So a slightly different vibe for this Spider-Man. What was going on in Ultimate?
So in Ultimate, they kind of tried to recapture the world outside your window and kind of age it up a little more and make it more modern. And in this one, it's very much, Spider-Man kind of learning his lesson, almost like to what you said, Jake, about, the gall of this guy. Like there's leading up to the issue where he dies, there's a lot of talk of, this is a kid and he's gone out and he's not always making things better. And there are a lot of, the Ultimates, the Avengers of this universe are, just kind of debating the merits of Spider-Man and whether they like him or whether they should bring him on or whether he's too young. And what happens in the final issue is all of Spider-Man's biggest villains have teamed up together and are coming to his house. They know who he is, and they're just coming. They kill him eventually. The fight kills him, and it is very much like you tried to do this yourself, and it didn't work out. People along the way have died and now you are dead. But I think what's so beautiful about it is he accomplishes his mission. Mm-hmm. He protects Aunt May. That was his whole thing. After Uncle Ben died, he just wanted to keep Aunt May safe. And he dies doing that. He dies protecting everyone he loves. And moreover, he doesn't leave Aunt May alone. Mm. It's such a, you and Dave talked about it earlier in the office. It's such a odd status quo for the book toward the end where Aunt May's house is like a halfway home for all these people with superpowers. Yeah. Gwen Stacy is living there. She doesn't have superpowers, but the Human Torch and Iceman are both living there.
Yeah.
And when Peter dies, Aunt May is hugged by Gwen. MJ is there. These two boys are there. And it's all the more beautiful because he gives her this family to look after and to look after her by the time he dies.
Yeah. Speaking of, I would love to actually back up because the story of the death of Spider-Man, I feel like starts in that, and as they kind of knew in the one shot before Happy Birthday, is it Happy Birthday Peter Parker or Happy Birthday Spider-Man? There's a one shot right before the final arc.
I can't remember, but yeah, it is. It's like a big surprise party that he walks into.
Yeah.
With Kitty Pryde and like everyone is there to greet him, and it's such a funny deliberate send off for him.
Yeah, and it's like him and MJ finally get back together. Mm-hmm. He also has a fantastic scene with J. Jonah Jameson where he gets his job back at the Bugle. J. Jonah knows that he's Spider-Man, and they have this final actually being on the same page, and they're both understanding each other. And it's knowing that he dies soon after that, I start to get he got it. He got the job. He got the girl. Yeah. His, and that's his final line is, I did it. It's he's like, I did it. It's okay. Mm-hmm. I wasn't, and he says something about I wasn't able to protect Uncle Ben, but I was able to save you, talking to Aunt May. And it's it's so good because it is really he dies, but he was able to actually achieve his mission. He also kills Green Goblin in that issue. I'd love to hear your thoughts on basically Peter's last act is killing another man. And then the actual final shot of the issue is Norman Osborn in flames on the edge of death. It just zooms in on his face smiling. And I thought that was wild. I can't believe you ended on that guy. That guy's the worst person. And it's such a reward of that premise to me of Osborn saying like, at least you'll be dead. Because Peter's like, why are you doing this? You can't get your son back. You can't get your career back. And he's like, well, you'll be dead. And he's like, I guess you're right. And I think it's really fascinating to see like Peter kind of coming to the same conclusion of like, I might die, but at least that guy will be dead and my family will be safe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, obviously Ultimate Spider-Man didn't really end there. They came back with Miles, and but Jake, you may have to speak more to this. But Norman's alive, right?
Yes. I cannot remember exactly how all that works out.
For some reason, I can't divorce myself for being like pragmatic editorial mind about it, where to me it's like this guy's still around. Like this guy's still here. Teasing more, because what I love about this, it's ironic that I'm saying this, because what I love about this issue also is that it tells a complete story. Like we get a beginning, middle, end of Spider-Man's career, and it feels like the end is like, no, there's more coming, and they had more coming.
Yeah.
They did Ultimate Fallout, which starts with Peter's funeral and ends with the reveal that someone else is Spider-Man. I can't give like a less pragmatic answer than that.
Yeah, and to talk about that, so we know that death is impermanent in these worlds. These are huge, massive deaths. Obviously, Gwen Stacy comes back. I believe, Ultimate Spider-Man, all these lines continue after this death. But I think what's really helped for both of them at the time is the fact that at the time it happened, it felt final, right? Because it's the end of, Peter's line. It's the end of that series. So though we know he might come back, we're like, it's probably going to be a long time, right? Like it's the end of the series. Also, it's saying goodbye to that arc overall and that stepping back from that world. And then Gwen, I think at the time it was just, we're so early, the idea of her coming back or being anyone else is wild.
Both of these characters never really came back. Like Peter Ultimate doesn't ever come back, right?
I think not in a huge way. They never bring back Ultimate Spider-Man with Peter as a headliner.
Yeah.
I think there's some implication in like Spider-Man at some point that he's like okay and living with MJ. But neither of these characters really they do a lot
of
Gwen
like, gets cloned. That's the thing.
They do.
Like when Gwen goes back, it's not really Gwen. And that whole story is interesting. But
and that's what's so funny about mainline Spider-Man is all the buffoonery that goes on. Everyone, it's so funny picking up the average Spider-Man comic. When I first started reading Spider-Man years and years ago, I started with the Superior Spider-Man because when I was getting into Marvel, I was always a DC kid growing up, and when I was getting into Marvel, those like weird takes on characters, those weird eras that they had going on. It was the time where Jane Foster was Thor, Dr. Octopus was Spider-Man, Thanos Wins was coming out, was when I finally started picking all of this stuff up. So I went back and read Superior Spider-Man. That was kind of like what I saw is, things are so different. That's a great time to jump in. And I loved it, but also it was funny finding out like, these people have been dead. These people have all dated. These people have been Spider-Man. Like, so there's so much going on with the side characters in that book.
Yeah. Well, and also like talking about loving this issue, but also this being something that broke comics. I think one of the things about this, one of the reasons they killed Gwen, is that they also just kind of didn't know what else to do with Spider-Man and Gwen. Like, they felt like they'd come to this place where they like didn't quite know where to go with them. And it is the moment where I think they kind of officially decide that these characters can't grow up, which is something that, again, like I always found kind of frustrating because like they couldn't get married. They couldn't do anything. Like you can't have them progress much farther in life. So like once something happens and gets to a certain point, you have to go, okay, well, now we have to tear it all down and start back over again, which is so fascinating because they, again, like the Mary Jane romance lasts for ages and they do eventually get married. And, that led to some fascinating storylines because people got tired of that but didn't know how to break it up. But yeah, just this idea that these characters have to be held in stasis. But one of the things that makes both of these so compelling is that what they did lasts, like what they did actually holds. And does change the characters irrevocably. Like, it's very funny to me where it's like, well, we can't have Spider-Man and Gwen get married because, you know, that will change the status quo too much. So now we have to give him this dead love that will haunt him for the rest of his life.
And that's
like,
way more chill.
You're like, well, okay. Yeah, I do want to see them grow. And they do in both of these. I think all the characters around Spider-Man in that old, like, Spider-Man's death changes everyone there, and it lasts, and, you know,
it's really funny in a way. Ultimate Spider-Man's death is he occupies like a Jason Todd role in the Ultimate Universe, where that the whole 10 issues leading up to it, one of the big plot lines is that the Ultimates are training him because they've decided we need to do something about this kid, but he's a good kid and he's gonna grow up and do this anyway, and we can't really stop him, so let's give him the training he needs. It's like there's an issue where he comes home and Aunt May is sitting in the living room surrounded by S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and Carol Danvers, who was the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. at the time. And they tell him, like, you're going to superhero school. And it's like the big end of that issue. So they've been looking after him and they've been trying to protect him. And Spider-Man becomes like the little guy, the little sidekick that that hangs over them. And I don't know how long that lasts, but someone who hasn't read every issue of the Ultimate Universe, but it's a really fun thing that they play with immediately after his death.
You know, it's also funny seeing the repercussions of this issue and how much this issue informs everything Spider-Man does. There's so much of it in the Ultimate stuff because, like I said, like, he and Gwen had recently broken up in this arc, and like they're broken up in Ultimates, like, you know, because there was a big storyline right before this where someone's impersonating Spider-Man and Peter, and it becomes a whole thing. He does a bunch of terrible stuff, and so like he and Gwen had broken up, and then in here, like, they reconcile, but they don't get back together. Very notably, Gwen is like, no, you belong with MJ. But like, there's kind of that stuff there. There is the sense too of like, you can't let a kid just go do this stuff. He's going to get someone hurt, which is exactly what happens there. Like, there are all of these kind of echoes here because that's such a seminal story that, you know, Bendis is obviously having that in his head, knowing this important death is coming up.
And even the childhood fantasy you mentioned that superheroes are enacting, like the childlike fantasy, I guess. It's, I guess, killing Spider-Man as a kid is almost like a perfect fulfillment of it because he doesn't grow up to change or to make it seem sillier. It's like this kid got in way over his head and it killed him.
Yeah. I want to talk now that we've been talking kind of each issue, I want to talk a little bit about what's similar between them, because we're talking about the same character and there are some really interesting parallels in both, right? We have Green Goblin in both. We have a Green Goblin death in both. Another one I noticed is, and I think this just kind of makes sense, you know, Spider-Man's back is up against the wall. He's significantly injured or underhanded in both.
Yeah, because he's sick in 121 and he's shot in that one. So yeah, he's hampered in both, absolutely. Which again, that's also that underdog nature of Spider-Man is so a part of that character. Yeah, it is fascinating to see how firmly embedded the character of Spider-Man and like what makes a Spider-Man story. So when you have to make a huge Spider-Man story, you're like, well, here's these, like, you know, and, you know, again, they move from Gwen to MJ in both as well, because there's that great issue after 121 where the issue ends with Peter having this freak out in his apartment with Mary Jane, and the last page of the issue is Mary Jane deciding, she's like, Peter's telling her to leave and she's at the door, and then she closes the door and stays in, and that's like setting the scene for what's to come, you know?
Which I think that was such a beautiful ending. Yeah, I think it would have landed better for me if I'd read it as a book, but I read it online, so it was really funny. Like I hit next, and it took me to the next issue, and it's like, wait, what?
What's already left?
That's for your imagination.
Yeah.
Just to talk about some of those visuals, in both issues, we have incredible art for both of these. Obviously, some of the most famous panels in comics coming out of the pages of 121. And then also, I mean, fantastic work going on over in the Ultimate Spider-Man, which I was thinking about this, Bagley, and I believe, I don't know the colorist's name off the top of my head, but looking at...
I think it's Ponzer, right? Color and Bagley, because Ponzer was on that whole run and was one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah. So it's looking at these issues, and Bagley was also on the series from almost the beginning, correct? Like he was on for the whole run. So it's really wild to see this artist who's been with these characters so long getting to articulate this death so beautifully after spending this much time with them. And like, I think the subtlety he was able to bring with it was like really incredible. But I mean, we're talking about very different art styles here. We're talking about completely different eras. So now kind of like point and counterpointing the positives and negatives of these, right? So we brought these in. It's, we're talking about they're both incredible issues by incredible teams. But if we had to start looking at meaningful impact long-term, what are our sort of our points and counterpoints about these issues to defend your own or possibly point out, well, maybe not for that issue? Who dares to go first? Anyone have any problems with either of these?
Well, I mean, like I've already talked about some of my problems with this issue. That, like, it does break a few things, and I think maybe I was talking with Dave outside about this, but like to me, I kind of feel the way about this issue that when you talk to some cineasts about Jaws or Star Wars, where they're like, yeah, those movies are good, but like they broke movies. Like after, when you had the 70s and stuff, you would have eras where like Kramer versus Kramer was one of the most successful movies of that year. Like a divorce drama was one of the highest grossing movies of all time. And then after you have these blockbusters, then everything has to be a blockbuster. And there are some people who blame, those movies, and it's, well, they're great movies. It's not their fault that everything afterwards changed. It's somewhat how I feel about this one a little bit. As much as I also, like, I don't know, I go back and forth on the growing up of comics in general, and it led to some incredible stuff. It led to some stuff I find really frustrating. But I do think, one of the things when you look at the art for both and the way both are written, it's so interesting how like operatic and soap opera the old stuff is. Everything's very heightened, again, like everyone's still working off of like those incredible Kirby poses and things like that, like there's, and I was talking about how young Jerry Conway was when this came out. Like Gil Kane was a veteran by this time. Like he's got that like classic style. And then you look at Ultimate Spider-Man, and there's the subtlety that you get into with Bendis's writing and Pichelli's art and Bagley's stuff. Like, they're great at finding these little moments and really making these characters shine in these small interactions and beautiful little bits. And it's just, comics had changed. Like comics were able to do that stuff. You could plan this stuff out more. You think about how long it takes Peter Parker to die. He gets shot and he's still got like 5 issues to go.
It's wild.
It's out of control. But it's also great because you get all of these little moments. Like even the little moments in these early issues still feel soap opera, still feel very, very heightened. So I think that's one of the differences in that. And I do think you can live in it a little more by the time you get to Ultimate Spider-Man dying in a way that's nice. I mean, like they still kept Gwen's death hanging over the book for a long time, but again, in a way that feels grandiose as opposed to in a way that people just sit with it in the Fallout issues and stuff like that. And that's nice, again, that's a maturity that leads to some really good storytelling.
What about on Ultimate? Do you think there's so obviously an incredibly meaningful death to the character around Spider-Man. It affects the whole world. It ends the run. But in terms of like impact, because this one's got impact in spades, it potentially demarks the end of an era in comics. It begins a tradition. It changes so much about the way we tell stories in comics, or at least as like the torch bearer saying we can do it this way now. This one is, 2011, much farther. Comics has been really well established by the time we're getting to 2011. What do you think about like the impact of this comic and this death? Do you think it can stand up to the impact of something like the night Gwen Stacy died? An excellent response. Fantastic.
Well, what you have to kind of say with this one, though, is Miles. Like, that's what's on the other side of this book. And, that issue that introduces Miles in Fallout is beautiful. And I think the first issue of Miles Ultimate Spider-Man is beautiful. It's one of the best first issues of a character, like, so beautifully laid out. Miles is such an incredible character. But that idea that Spider-Man's an idea really comes in here in a way that doesn't elsewhere, because somebody else takes the mantle, and that thing of legacy that Marvel has always had kind of a hard time with passing mantles, that's one of the few cases where it really, really plays. So I think that's kind of incredible. And the fact that Miles has become such a huge character, that's been tried so many times and rarely ever takes. So
interesting about this one is we talk a lot about how this is the end of the book, but it's not really the end of the story. And in the way that ASM 121 keeps going, like this universe did keep going, and these characters were still around, and I think the difference is it came out in 2011, 2012 when you would try to get more number ones, and so they, rather than making it issue 161, Miles shows up the way they did, kind of the way they did with Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern 51. We get a whole new character. They took their time and then relaunched and introduced him in another miniseries and gave him his own book.
Before we get into kind of closing arguments, one thing I want to step back and ask both of you is, as editors, is there something you think is especially important, or a specific way to handle death? Because obviously deaths, especially in comics, can sometimes be rushed or flippant or overhauled in the next issue. So what are things you find incredibly important and nuanced about a death when telling a story? And are there any deaths in particular that you guys have worked on as editors that you particularly think went, I don't know if the death went well, but you think would really nailed that?
I mean, again, I think meaningful is the crux on the weight of what all this is weighed against. And I think it's tough because you don't want the deaths to be flippant, but you don't want to hold people in too much of a glass cage either. And so, I think the question is, you just kind of have to earn it. And it's tough because everyone thinks that they've earned it. Like, I think you ask anyone who's even written the most flippant comic book death you've ever read, they're going to say, well, no, I actually think that was really important. Like, we needed this to happen or whatever. So, I think it's difficult because you just have to kind of see if it works. People won't have a problem with it. I say knowing that that's not true, because there are plenty of people who don't like the way Gwen Stacy dies in this issue, or the way other characters have happened that a lot of other people find meaningful. But, I think you really just have to sit with the story and say, like, is the juice worth the squeeze here? Is this something where this death is going to really matter and mean a lot, and not in a cheap way, but in a lasting way too? Thinking about, how is this going to carry forward? Is this going to give our character the strength to fight for one issue and then whatever? Right. Or, are we really going to deal with this? Yeah, it's tricky. If it's good, it works, and if it's not, it doesn't. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Any particular death you've worked on that you think maybe?
Yeah, you said you were going to ask this, and I'm like, oh, I know. I've definitely. Well, you know what? Here's the one, and this is actually one that I thought about doing. And this is a spoiler for the series. So if you have
exclusive,
if you have not read Dan Slott's Silver Surfer, just stop right now. Go and read the Silver Surfer run. It's gorgeous. But the whole story of the Silver Surfer run is Silver Surfer, and I've now completely forgotten this woman's name. This is the Ladybug. Like she wears her red and black polka dotted suit, and she's such a great character. And I'm sorry, Dan and Mike Aura, that I've forgotten her name right now. This is terrible.
Somebody quick Google.
But you know, the whole issue is this beautiful, or the whole series is this beautiful relationship between the two of them. And there's a moment where, because they're out on their adventures, that character misses her father's death. And it's kind of crazy because in the story, the father's 100% drawn to be Dan Slott. And then Dan Slott kills him, which is a very Dan Slott thing to do. But then at the end, I can't remember the mechanics, but they kind of get stuck in this weird time thing. And Silver Surfer just gives her a whole life. And it ends with her dying, and then he comes back. I get very emotional about these things. But it's so good. It's such the perfect way to end that book. I loved that book. And I'm telling you that I was part of that story, but I actually think I was off the book by the time I think I ended up leaving that book like a few issues before.
You wouldn't have let it happen. You would have stopped
it. But let's be like, I think I primed the pump for that. Very good and emotional.
That was all you.
But that's one of the ones that immediately comes to mind for me of like a great death, great story, that I was at least tangentially.
Yeah, I think that counts. I think that absolutely counts. Yeah. I mean, it is, I get emotional even hearing about it. Like when a death has that moment of like, we lost them, but.
Yeah,
it's like, that's so very, like that's, because that's what you can hope for, is that sense of like meaning, because you don't want it to just be, they're gone and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it does a good job of that. You get the feeling that that's, going to last with the Silver Surfer for a long time. Yeah. Even if the next person doesn't pick up on it, someone could in 15 years, and everyone who has read that will go, of course. Well, yeah. The Silver Surfer still feels this way about nameless character.
Dawn Greenwood.
Dawn Greenwood. That's it. Dawn, I love you. I'm so sorry. But yes, the beautiful death of Dawn Greenwood. Yeah, stunning.
Nick, have you got a favorite death you've been worked on or tangentially associated with?
I haven't really had any in my career. No one's died on my watch.
Look out, Rocketeer.
Rocketeer.
Betty, he's coming for you. You can't kill her. You can't kill Betty.
You have no idea what I can do. I think the closest to a death I've gotten, it was like an immediate figure. It was like a Bruce Wayne death. But at the end of the first TMNT IDW ongoing series, Donatello is stranded in the space-time continuum for like a year, and comes back at the end of it, and he comes home to Northampton, to April O'Neil's family's farmhouse, and it's winter and it's the snow and everyone is there. All his family is there.
Yeah,
they're building a snowman. They're having fun. And he just kind of steps out of a portal and looks horrible. He looks awesome. But you can tell he's been through it, and he's just been trying to get home for a year. And everyone runs up and is so happy to see him. And they just all hold him and they cry. And the issue just ends on that. The run ends on that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful issue.
Yeah, but that's... not a death.
Not exactly.
but it is like a reaction. It is a reaction to getting something back. Yeah. Which I think is something that people try to pay off a lot when they bring back characters that were killed off, and it doesn't work too often. I think it works less than a death.
Yeah.
But when it can land, it's really nice. And I think part of why that one worked is because it happened within the same issue. There was no long status quo of us trying to, pretend and trying to get everyone in on the bit.
Yeah.
Okay, now that we've really discussed every single angle of these comments, explored their history, their meaning, everything in between, it's time for closing arguments, because only one of these characters' deaths gets to leave this stadium alive, because we have to kill the other one that loses. So, as it is essential for any argument, I would like to hear your closing arguments. Why is your character death deserving to be called the best comic book death of all time?
I said it earlier, but it's kind of, he accomplishes the mission. He saves Aunt May, he saves his friends, he saves his family, he saves his girlfriend, and he leaves no one alone. I think there's something to, I can't imagine a greater barometer of a life well lived. I think that's so, and what makes Peter Parker's death in Ultimate Spider-Man so impactful is he did such a good job. he tried really hard. He did his best, and it just brought people to him, good and bad. But he was able to keep the good people together, and I think that it left so much, and it also paved the way for the future. It paved the way for Miles. And I think it's beautiful as an ending to his story, even if it's not the end of Spider-Man's story.
It's one of the true great endings in superhero comics, which don't usually get endings at all.
Yeah.
And it is a nice counterpoint where it's something you said earlier that I really loved, that both he and Norman accomplished their missions, but you see how different their missions were. Like, so often the villain is the dark mirror or foil of the hero, and it's kind of beautifully done there of like, yeah, both these guys got what they want, but look at what this guy wanted and look at what this guy wanted. Like, it really, really puts into relief who's a hero and who's a villain, And
it's something that even when this happened, people talked about how nothing like this could happen again. To have 160 issues plus whatever other tie-ins Bendis did when he wrote this series, and the 110 plus that Mark Bagley drew. That's simply, we don't get those anymore. We don't get runs like that anymore on a single character, on a single title. It's irreplicable at this point in this industry.
Yeah, I remembered reading an anecdote where Bendis said he cried for like 45 minutes after he finished writing the issue. And you can really feel that in the pages. It is that emotional. I apologize if that's a misquote. I'm pretty sure he said that. Otherwise, he's just a big crybaby, and I'm calling him out.
Yeah, he probably cried after every issue.
Yeah, he was like, that was the shortest time yet. Final arguments? The night Gwen Stacy died.
Yeah, I mean, Ultimate Spider-Man's death is a great death, but it couldn't have happened without Gwen. There's so many echoes of the Gwen death there, and so many echoes of the Gwen death across all of comics. It's one of the most meaningful, impactful stories. It's daring. It's beautifully told. It lived with the character forever, one of the greatest characters in all of storytelling history. And Gwen's death is part of what makes Peter Parker who he is, even when he's a different Peter Parker. So, it's undeniable, I think. Gwen is the death that shook comics.
When it comes to comic book deaths, there's so much to talk about. The good, the bad. Was it the right time? Did they earn it? And what does this mean for the character going forward? Is this going to last? Are you shorting the audience's expectations? Are you cheaping their experience? And I think both of these comics are an absolute testament to what comics can be. One that marked the beginning of that journey, and then one that I'm sure will say is like a pinnacle of the example of like the greatest thing comics can achieve. And looking at the meaning and the impact of both deaths, I think both of these characters brought so much to the comic reading world. Gwen Stacy, her sacrifice went on to open numerous conversations about the death of characters in comics, how we handle that, as well as influencing the trajectory of several beloved characters moving forward. And Ultimate Spider-Man, on the other hand, was a character that kind of opened up and offered a welcoming hand to a whole new generation of comics readers. And with all of this considered, I think while both selections are absolutely fantastic, and I wouldn't change either of these issues, I think the award for Best Comic Death, based on its articulation, emotional impact, and meaning to the comic book community, is Ultimate Spider-Man.
Oh.
Ooh.
And I feel really conflicted about it.
Pick the main character, man.
I feel so conflicted.
Send comments to Ellen Boener at IDW.
I know they're both really important. I know they're both really important. I think for me, what it comes down to, and I was so conflicted in this conversation, because for me, what it comes down to is, and I believe everything I just said, both of them are fantastic. I love so much of the story. What this comic was doing was so ahead of its time. It was so ahead of its time, it created, or it was the hallmark for a new era in comics. But for me, I think there is a sense of closure that we get out of the death in Ultimate Spider-Man that, because this is the middle of the run, we can't have. And I think it's something that, while it's beautifully done in so many ways, I think the fact that this death is like the closure of the series, the ultimate reward for the reader, and it felt meaningful, and it was like a journey that felt so complete and not just a part of a longer journey that would go on to have many more deaths and many more ups and downs, and did hang over the story, as we've talked about. Gwen Stacy's death, incredibly important to Peter. I think ultimately the way it hits me is it does, the moments in the Ultimate line really almost make me cry every time. Specifically, one of my favorite we didn't talk about is the moment when his neighbor said, "You're May Parker's boy, aren't you?" And it's like the moment when his neighbors see that it's him. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. And I think one thing we didn't talk about is the covers for this issue too. You know, ASM 121 had a beautiful cover. We were talking earlier about just how great and eye-catching that is. One thing that's interesting about Ultimate Spider-Man is this cover that's on the shelf of Spider-Man walking away with Uncle Ben, walking into the light. That's not the A cover. That's not the main. The main cover is just like a sick pinup of Spider-Man jumping into action. But I feel like there's this cover does so much to add to the issue. It's so additive to the story because it's really a story about Spider-Man kind of. It's odd to phrase it like this because he died, and that's not good. He was a 15-year-old boy that died. But for our purposes, he kind of got what he deserved. He got to rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do, like, you're wrong, and I appreciate it. But what I will say is, like, this one set a template that a lot of people have copied and used and that kind of thing. The thing about Ultimate Spider-Man is it is kind of singular. Like, it's hard to think of any other death, particularly in, like, mainstream superhero comics, that felt that way, that did what that did. I mean, you really do have to look outside of things that are like corporate IP controlled, and the fact that something like that actually happened and lived and stayed the way it was is incredible. And again, like a pretty singular achievement that only Bendis at that time probably could have done.
Yeah. I do think there's something to be said that I completely agree. Ultimate Spider-Man and that death could not have happened without the work in the original series for many obvious reasons, but specifically Gwen Stacy's death. And I think there's a lot of conversations that began because of this issue that allowed them to do what they've done in this series. So what birthed it, and then maybe what perfected it, on the other hand. So
I think they're such different deaths as well, whereas Gwen's is kind of, and same with Jason Todd, and anytime someone loses someone, a superhero loses someone close to them, is, you know, they're almost relearning the lesson they learned in the first place. You know, he's re-experiencing Uncle Ben when Gwen dies. You know, and this time it's almost, he has all this power. He has all the morals, and he was there, and it still didn't work. And I think that's an interesting thing to give someone like that, someone who's dedicated to their life to making up for this thing that he feels like he couldn't do. Just in the way, you know, Batman is trying to save his parents all his life, but sometimes he fails all over again.
Well, we've done it. And I think we all should maybe have worn black for this. But I think it's time to finally lay these characters to rest. And these creative teams, thank you everyone involved on these issues and on the team. You gave incredible stories to the world of comics, and thank you for making this a hard decision. Yeah. So I think that's all we have here for Superlatives. We'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for listening. If you liked hearing our thoughts on other comics, you should check out our comics, available at any local comic book store or online at idwpublishing.com.